Welcome back. And when we left, we were talking about antibiotic resistance and antibiotic residue. And there's a couple things that you've brought with you today to talk about some of the type of antibiotics used in human and animal production. So let's go to the first slide here, and I'll let you explain what you've got here.
Sure. Okay, there's quite often a lot of talk among activist groups about the percentage of antimicrobials that are used in livestock production, and sometimes they'll throw around numbers like 80% of the antibiotics that are used in North America are going towards livestock, and that number is grossly inflated. But the more important issue is that not all antibiotics are the same, and in fact what there is actually 4 different categories of importance of antibiotics. And if you in this picture we got here, you can see the 4 along the side. There's very high importance as obviously the most important category, and those are the drugs that are used as drugs of last resort in human medicine. So they're used for really, really serious infections, and if they don't work, there's nothing else to go to. And so it's really, really important that resistance doesn't develop to those. The next category down is high importance, and those are drugs, they're used in human medicine as well, and they're used to treat a variety of things, but generally if they don't work, you can always go to the next category up to that very high importance one. In the medium importance category, those are actually, they can be used in humans, they have been used in humans, but they haven't been routinely used in humans for about 30 years. So that's things like tetracycline, which is used in acne medication now, so it's not a life-threatening drug, and then or a critical important drug. And then the bottom category are low importance. Those are things like ionophores, and those aren't currently used in humans at all. Now, the reason this is important is that livestock production, all livestock production, uses drugs from each of these categories. But what's important to note is that the way we use these drugs and which ones we use are different than the way they're used in humans. And we've got a picture to show that as well. And so here, these categories are laid out in the same way as in the previous slide. We got the very high importance on the top and the low importance on the bottom. But now the bars are referring to whether they're used in humans or animals. And the blue bar is use in humans, and the green bar is use in feedlot cattle. And what you see is that 80% of the antimicrobials that are prescribed for human use are from the very high and high importance categories, and the feedlot use of those drugs is so low that those bars don't actually show up there. There should be, or there are bars, but they're so close to zero they hardly count. In fact, with feedlot cattle, over 90% of the drugs we use are of the medium and low importance category, and over close to 90 or just over 90% are actually never used in humans at all. So that's one big misconception.
So we really don't have very much crossover at all.
There's very little overlap between the drugs we use in humans and the ones we use in animals. Now, an equally important thing is that you don't just have to take my word for it. There's a lot of surveillance that goes on. We fund a lot of research to look at the degree to which antibiotic resistance may be developing in feedlot cattle, but we're not the only ones. Actually, Health Canada has a program it's called CPARS, Canadian Integrated Program for Antimicrobial Resistance Surveillance. CPARS is easier to say, but they do routine surveillance of antimicrobial resistance in cattle entering feedlot or entering packing plants, as well as in retail meat samples that they pull off the shelf. And so we got some slides to show that as well. And so here's some results from the CPARS surveillance that they've done over this is one of the more recent reports. And what you see is just what we want to see, is that the resistance to those drugs in the very top category, the very high importance in human health, those levels of resistance are right down at 0%. They are extremely uncommon to see any resistance to those drugs of last resort. You do see some at the very bottom in tetracycline, but again, those are drugs that are not used. They haven't been routinely prescribed in human medicine for 30 years, so there's no big concern there.
Okay, so this is the science behind what's going on with resistance and the residual items. Now, you mentioned to me before the show about the situation in Denmark, of where the Danish government has routinely rejected the use of antibiotics in animals and made that into law. So you have governments legislating against basically what you're showing me as the science here.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that there's a lot of concern around the use of antimicrobials for growth promotion. And ionophores are growth promotants. What ionophores do is they allow cattle are big. The reason cattle can digest forage is because they have the rumen. And the rumen is full of all kinds of different bacteria that can break down the fiber in the forage. And what these ionophores do is that they work against the bacteria that digest that feed really inefficiently. And so when we get rid of those bacteria, two things happen. And one is, well, actually three things happen. One is that more nutrients go to the animal rather than just the bacteria, so that the animal grows better. Another thing that happens is that some of those bacteria actually can, or not bacteria, but protozoa can actually cause the animal to get sick. And so there's a disease called coccidiosis that's less rare. Also, if the animal's getting more nutrients, they're going to be in better health. And so you can help prevent disease with that. And then the third one that quite often isn't realized is that those ionophores, the bugs that they're working against that cause the inefficiency, the reason they're causing inefficiency is that they're producing a lot of methane. And so the use of these ionophores helps to improve efficiency, but it also has environmental benefits. Now, it's a long way of getting around to the point here. Now, there's concerns around, even though these ionophores aren't used in human medicine at all, that they don't like the volume of them that are used, even though there's no relevance for human health. So in Denmark in the mid-90s, they banned the use of ionophores and tetracyclines as growth promotants. And so what that meant was you could only treat animals once they got sick. You couldn't use antibiotics to prevent illness. You could only treat them once they got sick. And what happened was that they did see a huge reduction in the amount of antimicrobials that were used. So that was effective. There was less antimicrobial used. But what the unintended consequence is that there was a shift in the pattern of use. So instead of using antimicrobials that are of low importance or medium importance in human health, there was actually a shift towards much more use of drugs that are really important in human health.
Fantastic. We got to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion on this animal health topic.